this giant healthcare mess that is America, there is no reason that our lifespan, our health span shouldn't be increasing if we were doing our job better. And I think that should be everyone's mission. So if you're listening at home, you're like, Jesus Christ, I got another 15 patients today. Every single one of those goddamn patients is Frank's dad, is your dad. And that's what we're here to help. And by the way, doing smart business is only allowing us to fulfill that mission. And I think that's what we got wrong. That's what the grad schools got wrong. We were taught, we were educated, money is evil, running a good, successful, lean business. That's not why we're here. We're here to help. Well, guess what? If you're not doing the former, you'll never do the latter.
Mic drop moment.
Welcome back, True Sports family. This conversation that you're about to hear with Frank Benedetto is my favorite conversation that I've had during the True Sports Physiotherapy podcast. We've been doing this for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And Frank came to me kind of out of nowhere. He has an unbelievable project called the Honey Badger Project. It is an incubator for PTs that want to grow their business. It is totally different than just your run-of-the-mill business coaching. There are millions of business coaches. That's not Frank Benedetto. Frank Benedetto takes you under his wing and he teaches you how to achieve your goal, and it's totally customizable. He's a number of tracks. He's going to talk you all the way through, but that's not why this was my favorite episode. This was my favorite episode because Frank is one of the most mission-driven individuals that you will hear from in any industry. He pulls from a wide range of industries and brings them to physical therapy, specifically to private practice owners. If you're a private practice owner, if you're in orthopedics, if you're working your ass off treating millions of patients an hour, you want to hear this podcast and this conversation. And I don't even need to explain it more. You guys let me know what you think. Here's Frank Benedetto. Welcome back to the True Sports Physical Therapy podcast. Today's episode is going to be pretty business heavy, and I'm really excited about that because that's a world that I definitely live in and trying to figure out. God knows my graduate school education did not prepare me for that. And so that's where I want to kick it off with Frank Benedetto. Frank, what do we need to know about business and how do we learn it?
So the fundamental, right, is a broad question. The fundamental root is exactly how you started the episode. Is that exercise where you got to just like dream up some random clinic and then assign some random expenses to it. It's just, I think it's damaging. It's still being done, and it's hard to, most of us as clinicians in that moment, we have never really thought about business, especially PTs. Chiro's different, but PTs at that juncture, most of us go, oh yeah, that whole thing called private practice. And then the first exposure is this delusional nonsense reality that even when you then get exposed to good, solid information, your human nature is such that it's hard to disconnect from this, like, oh, well, you need $100,000 bank loan, right, to get started. Well, business today does not require a bank loan. Like there's 0% of PTs, in my opinion, that should start with a bank loan, unless you meet a very specific criteria and you have a very specific goal in a very specific time frame, to which almost no clinicians I meet have all three of those. So if I were to answer it in broad strokes, it would be like the lean startup method, in the sense of what it takes to actually get started in business right now is so remarkably low cost and low effort and low risk. And the riskiest thing to do, in my opinion, is to not be experimenting with those skill sets, especially where the world is going with technology and where the world is going and our profession is going, where if you just look back long enough, every industry goes through phases of consolidation and fragmentation. So these big players, they will fall, they will break apart. Then the small players that come from those, I mean, I'm like talking about corporate mills, right? I lived through the 90s, so did you. You probably were in high school and went to Health South or knew someone from Health South. That then fell, and then all these small private practices started. Then some of those succeeded and started buying other private practices and got venture capital money behind it. And now there are these giant businesses that will fall. And then there will be a sea of private practices all over again. And then we'll probably repeat, hopefully, because of incubators like mine and others, that will repeat in a way that is actually using like conscious capitalism that don't have to fall. that we could keep innovating as we grow. But I do think that it's the riskiest thing to do to not be experimenting with business, even if your intention is just to keep it on the side.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's a great way to look at it. I don't know that I've ever looked at from a macroscopic level like that, but that totally lands with me. Like I watched that. I watched the whole Health South thing. I watched the pivot thing. Now we have like the Athleticos of the world, and like we're gonna watch them fall apart again. And like, how do we understand the norms? It's why I love reading history. It's like we've seen it. We've seen this before, and we can probably predict where it's going. I also love that you're throwing a nuance into it, because this idea of an incubator, I haven't seen it. If it's out there, I haven't seen it. So I like that you're kind of putting a wrench in that just never ending cycle. Tell us what you currently do for a living.
I am the founder of the Honey Badger Project, which is a business incubator. And incubator, different than a coaching program. I exist to inspire innovation in healthcare. That's what I do for a living.
Okay. And you inspire it, or you invest in it, or both?
Both.
Okay. Okay. So give me the definition of an incubator, because I want to start super basic. Like I said, a lot of PTs are kind of novices as it pertains to business. So educate us a bit.
Can I tell you a story about how I decided to go incubator versus
No.
coaching program? But I think it'll.
No. Yes. Please tell us that story.
So 2015 to 19, I built and sold a multi-location practice. We had 5 locations, 3 were inside gyms, 2 were standalones. And man, that fucking business almost killed me. Like it succeeded, but it's why my beard is way whiter than your beard right
Yeah.
now. For the listeners, you got your visual if you're not watching on YouTube.
But
something.
neither of us have hair, if you were wondering.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's probably more genetic than it is stress.
Okay.
So when I sold that practice, it was I was like 30, what was I, 35 or 36, something like that. And it was like graduating from college all over again. I was like, what do I want to do next? It was like, it wasn't a sale where you like retire or anything. It was just, it bought me a fresh start. I could self-fund whatever I was going to do. I could probably invest in a couple things, but I needed to build something, that was going to be the rest of my career. And I was obsessed with Y Combinator. Y Combinator is an incubator out of Silicon Valley. And the majority of businesses that changed the world came out of that incubator. So we're talking like Airbnb, Coinbase, like anything that completely radically reshaped an industry came out of there. And I just started studying it. And I originally started studying it because I was like, I want to bring an idea there. I want to do that. I had 2 kids. We were about to have our third. I was like, I can't move to California and live there for 12 weeks. Like that would be crazy. But I just fell in love with the concept that anybody could bring any idea, and 12 weeks later have that idea be in real life. And then within a certain period of time after that, get it invested and funded and all this other stuff. So I started to ask myself, well, what would it look like to have that in healthcare? Did a little bit of research and said, wow, I don't think that exists for healthcare. There are some really specific incubators in healthcare. Like there's a mental health incubator that's cool, but it's really small scale. And I was like, what? I just started asking myself, what would it take to build an incubator? And my definition of that is where any clinician with any idea can come and learn how to turn that idea into a business with real clients in a very short period of time, and start a pathway to be able to make a living doing it.
Okay, so I've been in business for 11 years at True Sports. So 11 years ago, I have this idea that I want to treat a certain way. I want to be in a type of a facility. I want to treat a certain type of person. I would take that idea, call Honey Badger and say, hey, I got this idea. I want to come to you for walk me through those steps. What would that look like?
Yeah. So it sounds like you already know your who, which a lot of people don't. Right. So the lucky ones have a calling to either a market or a niche or a diagnosis, a type of person or a problem that they have fallen in love with already. Some clinicians don't, right? So they need help with figuring that out. So depending on your starting point, we start there. And then the next step, and I believe was really the missing link in my description of the incubator, is how to solve that problem uniquely through use of readily available technology. So what we don't do is have a template that is, this is exactly how every clinic or every practice should work. Instead, it's trying to extract the clinical philosophy and then asking, like, well, how can we deliver this outcome through use of multiple modes of delivery instead of just sessions, or instead of just sessions and a basic home exercise program app, to really create a member journey or a user journey modeling after some tech company type frameworks to accomplish a couple of different things. One, get those outcomes in a bigger, faster, or more reliable way, depending on which outcomes we're talking about. Have that be more affordable, and ideally more affordable than even in-network care. So when we use technology correctly, we can create, especially with nowadays rising deductibles, rising co-insurances and copays. It's actually not that hard to have a cash-based practice that is as affordable or more affordable than in-network care, which is really something I'm very passionate about. And then lastly, more profitable for the providers. So when you leverage technology appropriately, the scale goes beyond, so let's say, just yourself and maybe just a couple other clinicians. It's really to wherever each individual wants to take it.
Yeah. Okay. It's super interesting. Good on you for having that growth mindset, being on the bleeding edge of business and physical therapy specifically. It's really fascinating and inspiring. So you're already like checking that box. Now, who comes to you? Like at what stage of, let's say, True Sports, which is our business, what stage do I come to Honey Badger at?
So there's three tracks, and we didn't start with this. We started with startups only. And then those startups matured, right? So we
Mhm.
needed to give them places to graduate to and help with their new problems. And so we have three tracks right now. There's one from zero to startup. If you're an employee, if you have an idea, you have no business experience, there's a track for you. If you're a side business, you got established, but you can't quite break out. And they usually can't break out because there's a very obvious time and money math equation
Mhm.
that's sort of mind boggling that people get themselves into. They sell a model where all they sell is their time, and they only have, let's say, 12 hours a week to sell. Those 12 hours will never make you enough time to quit. And like, where's the mystery here?
Yep.
So we help those people pivot to a more time leveraged or innovative offer to then be able to leave their jobs. But my personal favorite is really more of the established practice, and that's our third tier program, where successful cash and insurance based practices who are like, I think there's just like another way, another level, and we help them either add revenue streams to keep their core model intact. We don't need to blow it all up, or some of them know, like, oh, I'm deep in this downward spiral of insurance
Yep.
reimbursement, and it's time for me to change. And then we create roadmaps to start innovating.
Okay. Super cool. So what's the time commitment and who are you looking for to apply to these? Like, how do I get in?
The time commitment varies per program and based off of your goal. So if we're like, I'll use a couple of different versions of the avatar. If you're a stressed out insurance owner or a cash PT that has just maxed out all of their time, there's really not a lot of time to innovate. And I learned this the hard way because my first curriculum that I ever wrote was called Creating More Creative Products in Healthcare. And I was so sad after the first 50 people went through because like nobody was really that creative.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, what happened here? Because it was me, like, and some of it was me. I wasn't good at this stuff yet. And but what I recognized is that people were somewhere on the scale of time poor and energy poor, and sometimes both.
Mhm.
And if you are time or energy poor, it is very difficult to become creative. So well, that's when we start to realize, okay, we need to build a roadmap to buy people's time and energy back, not for that to be the end goal. I literally have no interest in that. Like my interest is in getting more creative healthcare services in the hands of consumers. The But we can't do that if you're just time and energy poor.
Yep.
So for some people, we create a roadmap that they have to then simplify their business or add revenue streams to then give themselves the ability to drop certain insurances
Yeah.
or get out of sessions to then give them the space to innovate.
Yep. Yep. I mean, that really lands with me. Like if I had a nickel for every patient that I handed off, like that has become my world now. And a number of people within our business is athletes will come to us and say, "Hey, I want to get a session with you." I'm like, "Okay, awesome, but you can't. Here's an outstanding therapist." And it's like that handoff because like you're saying, like the leaders need to carve out this time to be creative, to work on leadership, to do things outside of holding the leg and stretching the hamstring, right? And that's what you're creating. That's what you're kind of getting to. So as if I'm applying to Honey Badger, how long am I there? What is it costing me? I assume it costs me something. Are you investing right away? Walk me through like your decision process.
Yeah, let's start with the investing one because I want to make sure I'm really clear about where that sits in our ecosystem.
Yep.
In incubator, in the traditional sense, every person is getting investment. We are what's called a front end monetized incubator. You could pay to learn from us. The most innovative businesses and those founders who have a desire for a massive impact, which is 0.0001, right?
Yep.
So imagine it as a roadmap, and there's exits. Everybody could get off when they feel called to get off. We need an army of clinicians to serve their local town. That is not below someone else's desire to, let's say, build something that's nationally serving nationally. In fact, I would argue that real change in healthcare comes from an army of people serving their local communities. So what we have, but I believe everybody should be innovating. It shouldn't just be giant companies like Hinge and Sword and all these other. It shouldn't just be them innovating and then everybody else just selling their time or crushing insurance visits.
Mm-hmm.
We should all be innovating the same way. And most clinicians, we're not, like, even me, when I first started, I wasn't thinking big. I was thinking like I'll have multiple clinics, right? Or I'd have one big clinic, or I'll have some cutting edge clinic. And then as you get your feet wet, your vision starts to expand as you get to, as you opened with the exercise we all went through in PT school. It's just such a joke.
Yep.
So once you start to understand what it could really be, some people's eyes open up. And we've made one investment. So we've had 1,200 clinicians through the program. I'll make sure you understand like the full transparency. We've made one investment so far, and it was to a program designed for digital health for truck drivers. Really cool initiative. That's potentially about to be acquired. We'll see. To its next its next place to grow.
Yeah.
And then next year we're doing our first formal cohort where we will be looking to recruit 10 to 12 business owners, clinicians who are seeking funding. And I've been building on the back end an investor network to, in the longer term, start matching founders with proven ideas with investors that are passionate about those ideas in a way that keeps the founders in control of their future. Because the old incubator model is one where you invest in 100 companies, assume that 98 are going to fail. One makes it kind of okay and pays the bills, and then one goes really big.
Yep.
That then that makes the incubator worth it. We can't do that in healthcare. That would not be ethically correct. And that's really more of my decade-long plan.
Okay.
Is to continue to grow that, and that'll be our fourth track. So that'll be our innovative track, where people are coming very specifically to get investment. Whereas the first three tracks are more of that come and get your consulting, get your advisory, get your coaching on the mechanics to learn from us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I have not seen something like this, which is why I was so excited to have you on the pod. I think it's genius. I also love that you're pulling from outside the industry. Too often when we do get creative, we just live in this ecosystem of PT, which is straight out of like 1930. So like forward thinking, pulling from other industries, bringing that into PT, I absolutely love it. How long am I with you at those various stages, regardless of what track? Or give me examples of track 1, 2, 3. How long am I with you? And then what do you envision this track 4 being?
Yeah. So the really cool thing that I just changed in this program over the last few months is we have no specific contract or locked in period of time. That the user journey that I've designed is 3+ years. There's no agreement that you need to sign that commits you to 3+ years. It's just that we practice what we preach, and every quarter we're essentially picking the next set of goals with you for you, so that you know this game you've been doing is 11 years. Like you don't stop growing in business. There's just the next thing you need to tackle.
Yep.
So we've set up our ecosystem that we're evolving with our clients. Now, with that being said, the general timeframes, we have people who come and just get launched and they're out within, let's say, 6 months. They've launched, they've validated. Validated means you've 5 to 10 clients. You've proven that people will buy this new innovative thing. And some people, very, very small minority, they move on, right? They move
Mhm.
on at the 6 month mark, and that's fine. That's welcomed. Most people though want to stay for our support in learning how to grow it, how to scale it, how to hire, how to do all the rest of the things, and how to continue to innovate. Because again, modeling off of the tech companies, the goal is not to figure it out when you launch. The goal is to launch what we call an MVP, a minimum viable product, and then use the feedback you get from your initial users, your members, to finish the product. So it's actually would be egotistical of us to think that we know better than the client. Instead, we need to set up businesses that elicit the feedback from the client and listen to them and then deliver the next feature. And then they go, wow, this feels like it was made for me. And it's just because you listened to them and you created the space inside your business to actually deliver it. But I'll give you one really specific example. One of my consumer facing businesses is called Fight Science, and it helps prepare combat athletes for fights, usually amateur or early stage pro. It also has another part that's really just for like enthusiasts and recreational athletes that are just obsessed with the sport to keep being able to play it, participate in it. And one of the things we recognize is that most fighters are broke, dude. Like, so anybody
Yeah.
tries to complain to me about like, no, you don't understand. I'm like, no, no, no. We could play the whose audience is more poor, mine. So
Yeah.
if they buy my stuff, me and my partner Adam, because they sense that it was made for them, and we don't sell this publicly, this piece I'm about to tell you, but one thing we recognize when we start asking ourselves, what does it take for a fighter to be able to be in peak condition on and off the mat? It's very hard to be your best in a fight if you're being crushed by financial stress. So we just hired my personal budgeting coach to say, hey, can we film like a 1 hour webinar that's finance for fighters? And it once they get inside and they see that as like a bonus, again, nobody's buying that. We're not posting on Instagram. But once they get inside and they're like, what? How did he know that I had that problem? And then we're solving problems that they didn't even know that we knew that they had.
Yeah.
That's listening to your audience and then continuing to build. And we do that inside the incubator ourselves. So people could stay for 3 to 6 months. 6 months is probably the shortest I would recommend. If it's less than that, probably something went wrong. But we actually just celebrated with our longest standing client who's been with us for 5 years, literally
Sick.
since I started. And I just met him in person at our first ever in-person event. It's pretty sick.
That okay, so that's awesome. How much does it cost me to be a member of Honey Badger?
Yeah. So we have full price transparency.
Good, because I just
With
asked
that,
for it.
yeah, with that said, I can't do it on a podcast because if our price changes,
Yep.
this podcast then needs to get edited or deleted.
Okay.
So what I'll tell you is that we have an initiation fee and then a monthly membership. And that initiation fee ranges from, depending on which program you're in, from like a few thousand to more thousand,
Yep.
And the monthly membership was really affordable for startups, and because we pour more into each level, then it goes up from there. But we've designed it to be practical at every level, and we're constantly iterating based off of what's happening in the marketplace and what people need. But if anybody is ever interested, we have a completely different enrollment process where we transparently share, and then people can leave and decide. There's never any sort of like decision to make on the call in any capacity.
Yeah. Okay. So that's super cool, and I really like the way you like handled that. Seemed very honest and forthright. The fact that you're iterating, you're figuring it out. It's variable. It might change. So just apply, and we'll figure out if you're a fit. Can you answer me
You
this?
don't even need to apply. If this sounds interesting, people can buy it. We try not to sell. We try to let people buy. So if this sounds interesting, like, you just ask my team and then they'll tell you how much it is.
Okay, I love it. And what do I get for that? You said you get coaching, you hold my hand. What's the commitment on my end?
Yeah, the commitment on your end is a couple fold. The one, if I could tell you, and I'll plug in back a question you said earlier to this too, is like, what do we need from you? What do we look for you? And probably what's related to this is what's going to actually make you successful. We've studied this. We have some pretty incredible back end technology to really track who's winning and who's not. And then we iterate both our features. So if somebody's leaning into a certain, not somebody, if a group of people are leaning into a certain feature set and they're not disproportionately winning to everybody else, we have to delete that feature set, right?
Yep.
So we've tried things over the years. Oh, I think this is going to be brilliant, and then we release that, and then a whole bunch of people spend time and energy there. And if that doesn't make a meaningful change to the norm, we remove it.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if people liked it or not. But the same thing goes for qualities of the other people, because we're in an industry where this shit is, I don't know, it's the fucking wild west. Like everybody and their mother's a business coach nowadays. And
Yep.
the so one of the ways that we're different is that we really are transparent about what makes people win and not win, that we've learned over the years. Number one is if you are anchored to an actual mission. Like, if you want 30 clients in 30 days, you can go somewhere else. Like I have no interest. If you think that you're going to come here for passive income, go ahead, go somewhere else. Like what we want is people who have a desire to serve and to number one is mission. Number two is an openness to embrace technology, because we had some people come in and then when they're not really open, they regress back to the perceived safety of selling sessions or insurance money. Because high ticket cash package sessions, it's like crack. It's hard to wean off, right?
Yep.
So once you get good at selling, let's say a $3,000 package, it takes some real guts to no longer sell that and sell something else that's time leveraged, even if in the long run it'll be more profitable, and in the long run it'll be better cash flow wise. In the long run, you'll have more time. In the short term, there's usually some sort of commitment or sacrifice that has to be made in a controlled way. And that one takes a mission where that there's a better way to serve your people. Two, it takes a commitment to leaning on technology. And if I had to give you a third, it would be the resilience to learn through failure. So clinicians are typically perfectionists, overthinkers, people pleasers. That trifecta is not a great combination to naturally be a fail forward mindset. I wasn't when I first started this.
Yeah.
I had to learn the hard way to stop holding on to this thought that like it'll be perfect one day. So the resiliency to be able to learn through that is pretty much the third pillar.
Okay. So, and how are you finding your members? How are they finding you?
Yeah, they find us. So the thing that I believe in is permission-based marketing. I learned all of my initial marketing from Seth Godin. That was in 2017-18 era when he had all MBA,
Yep.
and read every book he's ever written twice. If you're listening to this, and I take book recommendations very seriously, because I know that I can't help resist when somebody mentions a book, you go and buy it and it sits on a shelf. Anything you buy from Seth Godin is incredible. Purple Cow was one of the first business books I ever read. It was written unbelievably in, like, I think it was the earlier mid 2000s, and is still applicable, even if some of the examples are outdated. Some of the businesses already went out of business, but the principles are timeless in this, what he refers to as the third era of advertising. The first era of advertising, forgive me, I'll get some of this wrong, but the first era of advertising is like, I built this and somebody will then buy it, right? The second era of advertising is interrupting people's attention and then they'll buy it, right? So Facebook ads, things of that nature. And then the third era of advertising is what I personally call, this is a honey badger term, is manufactured network effects. And that's where your advertising is designed to reach 1, 2, and 3 degrees away from people who already know, like, and trust you, so that they go to their first, second, or third degree connection and be like, hey, you know this guy, Frank? You know this thing called Honey Badger? Like, what do you know about it? And we're constantly trying to actually get those connections to happen. And I believe in this, what some people are referring as a trust recession, because nobody's believing anything's real anymore, right? It's like
Yep.
everything's AI. Even my 13-year-old daughter listened to a very clearly human voicemail that said, it's from, like, I don't know, let's say a hotel. And it was like, hey, Frank, like, your checkout's at 11 o'clock. If you need anything beforehand, like, come to the front desk. You can feel free to just leave, drop the key here. And my daughter was like, wow, that AI sounded so real.
Sick.
Yeah.
It's a great learning point. Like the only way we're going to start to believe things is when they are recommended or you create that trust. So I totally understand that. Okay, so they're finding you. Are you flooded with applicants?
We are flooded with requests for free
Requests.
trainings. What
Okay.
we do is we give away tons of free trainings because we have an obscure name, the Honey Badger Project. What the hell is that, right? We're a business incubator. No one knows what that term is.
Correct.
We teach time leverage business models. What the hell is that?
No idea.
So the old adage in marketing, if you confuse, you lose. We I would say strategically, we're kind of confusing and symbolic, but the reason why is that it stands for something, right? It's like I don't want to even be confused with, I don't want to even be regarded as competition to some of what's out there in the industry. And so what we do is we give away tons of free trainings, and if those free trainings resonate, there's just natural ways to then request or book a call, or learn more from my team. And we do tons of introductory calls where there's no even discussion of what we do, and it's just more about helping understand the model and how it applies to somebody's career, if it's the right time or not the right time. And then if they want to hear more about the program, they book a separate call, and then they learn more about the program, and then they could decide from there.
How long did it take you to put this whole thing together?
I mean, I've been in business since 2015, so that's when I really started learning this craft. I'm not going to try to pretend and reverse engineer some sort of master plan story that I had this grand vision for this exact thing all along.
Yeah.
But I do believe that stumbling upon Y Combinator and Seth Godin, and honestly, just studying from people outside of healthcare was where I went right, because my own podcast, one of the branding lines I'm putting behind it is that it's interviewing thought leaders from outside of healthcare, because if healthcare providers had the answer, I don't think we'd be in the situation that we're in right now as a industry.
Yeah.
And my next podcast guest built was the co-founder of what became a billion-dollar airlines company that disrupted the airlines industry in 2012. It's a really cool episode, and like that's who I want to learn from. That's who I've always been trying to study from. And then assimilate those. I've always looked at my role as to go outside of healthcare and bring back the lessons and make it easy to digest for healthcare providers.
That's
And
awesome.
how did I come up with this? I
Yeah.
just practiced the human-centered design process, where I always left the business model incomplete. So I never have an expectation that I'm done. And I failed a whole lot. I very admittedly talk about lots of my failures.
Yeah.
And
Give me one of
what,
those failures, Frank.
oh man, which category?
So
Help me
many.
narrow it down.
Well,
Uh,
I'd love to hear about like how about this? How did you fail when you had your 5 practices? Because you only had them for
yeah,
five years. So it's a
yeah.
crazy growth trajectory. You probably made I'm guessing, a bunch of mistakes very quickly and then adapted appropriately so that you could reach an exit. So walk me through those, because I would
Yes.
selfishly love to avoid them.
So many mistakes. We'll start with the broader stroke ones. We actually had 9 clinics, and 4 of them failed, like full out. And I think one of the best things that ever happened is I started 2 clinics at the same time when I launched. So I had a disagreement with my employer in 2015. And I basically was given an ultimatum of either like stay and your job is going to suck, or leave now. And I left now. And I was in a pretty bad financial situation back then. My life did, I've had some dark turns, and I've talked about them in other podcasts. We go there too if we want. But I basically had 3 months of runway. Like I either needed to succeed, or I was going to move back home with my mom with like 2 kids and my family. Like that's how bad it was. I was living in an apartment at the time, and the I launched 2 clinics. One was in my hometown inside of a gym. One was like 20 minutes away in New Jersey, and one went on to be extremely successful and still exists today under the brand that bought us in Paramus, New Jersey, inside TNT. And the other one failed and went out of business. I don't know, like 6 or 9 months. And the huge disparity between where I went and did the exact same thing in 2 different places made me go, whoa, okay, why?
Hmm.
And now in retrospect, it's really easy to paint the differences. But me as a purebred clinician just trying to figure out business. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And I'll give you one lesson learned from it. Where you set up your practice, and this haunted me. And I remember when I read it in a business book, I wanted to be like, "Fuck you! This can't be true," because it takes. I'll just say the lesson first, so we can dissect it. Your market dictates your income earning potential. So, and we'll distill this down. Most clinicians should start inside of a gym because it's an extraordinarily low cost, low risk way to get started on the side or your initial business to be profitable and then self fund your growth. This way, you're never really dependent on anybody else in the beginning. Then you could go to your brick and mortar and expand out and all this other stuff. That's where most people should start. Which gym you choose is likely going to dictate your success more than any other variable, including how good you are, including how well you market, including how good you get at sales. So you could choose the right gym and suck at everything else and just win. Whereas you pick the mediocre gym, which I've done multiple times. So the first gym I chose that succeeded really well was the right gym, the right founder, the right people. And I thought I was like, I thought I had just figured it out. Like I
Yeah.
am Elon Musk, I am Bill Gates, like I am Elon Musk of physical therapy before he went crazy.
Yeah.
And I was wrong. I was clearly wrong. I got lucky. Then when I went into a mediocre gym, it's like third attempt or fourth attempt, my marketing and sales skill had to go way up because the right gym was like shooting fish in a barrel.
Yep.
And yeah, none of that would have happened if I just said, like, okay, Frank, like play it safe, just go to one gym. If I had just gone to the gym where I was fishing in a barrel, I don't think I'd know any of this stuff because
Yep.
it would have worked. I would have made money. I probably would have stayed there. I wouldn't have continued to try to grow.
Yeah. I think that's a great lesson. And a million of those small examples I've been through. So I've definitely chosen the wrong location. I've definitely had to close a location. It is immensely humbling, but an unbelievable learning experience. Like, why didn't it work? Why does it work here and not there? I'll also say, I'll add, not that you asked, but I'll add that my second location was in a gym that I thought would be awesome. I got in there, tons of athletes, and it wasn't the right fit. And instead of bolting, we figured out how to make it the right fit. And I think that it's an interesting lesson because sometimes sometimes we're going about it wrong. Sometimes it's not the wrong gym, it's the right gym. We're doing it wrong. You have to know your audience and like know who you're working with and whether it's worth figuring out a way to work with them as opposed to just cutting the line and moving on. So I think there are a few ways to go about it. Good on you for figuring that out and continuing to iterate. It's the same thing you do here. By the way, something you said earlier when you were talking about Honey Badger made me think about these lessons are in PT. We just struggle to pull them from the clinical to the business, right? And so it's like I went to school, I was taught to treat a low back a certain way. I never bothered to see, is it the way I'm treating them that's giving me good outcomes, or is it some other factor? Can I try another way to treat them, even though they're getting better? And maybe that's a bit so that I can cut the way I was previously doing it, which was too big of a time suck. That's what you're talking about. Like, hey, certain things dictate success. You got to figure out what those things are that dictate success. So I love that you're pulling from outside the business. There's also a lot of lessons, what we do clinically that should help us business-wise, and we just don't do them.
Yeah. And I'm glad you went there because what I am not is the business guy. So at the peak of my credentialing, and I don't have these anymore, so I'll be transparent about it. But at the peak of my credentialing, I was OCS, SCS, right? I had CS, CSCS, PES, TPI1, FMSC. I mean, there wasn't a letter that I didn't have.
I
And
saw that.
yeah. So the reason why is when I was committed to clinical excellence, but very quickly realized that my business model dictated the upper threshold of my clinical abilities. And that's why we call it a practice model. I help create practice models, not business models. Practice models are taking your clinical philosophy and making sure that your business model enables you to make the impact and use all the different tools and skill sets that you want to have. That's very different than just like copy and paste, stamp and repeat. This one business model could work and be really profitable if you just copy and paste it. But if you try to like force in your clinical philosophy, it's like that round square peg and round hole kind of concept.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, like another example of where clinical practice mimics business practice is when you said, like, if you're too married to the way you used to do things, then you can't iterate. It becomes like your baby and you want to protect it. It's the same thing clinically. Like I came out of school and I'm like, I'm a manual therapist. That's what I do. And if I would have stayed there and lived there and stuck with that, even though all the literature is telling me, dude, you can't feel that joint. Like, stop pretending you can feel that joint. There are a
No,
lot of
no, no,
people that
dude,
don't
I'm
care.
telling you, that right SI joint is like
Such,
point
it's such
five
BS.
mil.
It's such BS, but it's a great lesson. It's a great lesson for business, which
Yes.
clearly you've kind of adopted. Okay, I've heard you say we are so far behind on the business fundamentals in this profession. What do we need to know that we don't, and how do we learn it?
I'm gonna go back one question. I promise
No,
I'll
that was
answer
such
it.
a good
I feel like
question, Frank.
it really was. You delivered it so well too, profoundly. But I can't not stay on
Okay,
this
go
one
ahead.
part. So, what year did you graduate?
I graduated in '08.
Me too. So I
There
have a
you go.
feeling in 2015-ish, we had to hold a funeral for our magic hands,
Yep.
right?
Well,
Were we on the
we
same
should
time?
have. I think we
Yeah.
should have. Not everyone did, but you're right.
Yes. Like that transition for that class. Like I literally thought I could heal people right? At the peak of my delusion on the overestimation of the impact of manual therapy. I thought that I remember using an example of like if I opened a door, I could feel the hinge. That's how good my hands were.
Yep.
And then there's this existential crisis where you're like, oh my God, like, almost everything I believed is actually not true. But I got that. Why was I getting these outcomes? Like, and it just sends you into this existential spiral. But I'm very grateful for that phase. More people probably need to go through that phase with whatever they've become religious about in their clinical views. And the reason why I believe that that still needs to happen is the number one resistance we get to using, let's say, tech forward or app centric practices is a holding on to a belief that X intervention is disproportionately responsible for the result, as opposed to a more holistic, patient education centric, habit centric, mastery of the fundamentals centric, with a sprinkle of whatever clinical specialty or clinical beliefs that you have. But I've watched enough clinicians that have honestly sometimes polar opposite beliefs, and I try really hard to be clinically agnostic as long as you don't sell bullshit. So like if you're on the spectrum of research supported, there's still wild differences in
Yep.
that spectrum. It kind of doesn't fucking matter, as long as you have a specific outcome in mind that you're trying to get, and you're consciously trying to develop a clinical practice that you can iterate. You will eventually shave off the stuff that doesn't matter as much, and then you will be left with mastery of the fundamentals that's in some capacity, with a sprinkling of like experimenting with whatever is new and trending. That's totally fine and welcomed.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
love that.
so
No,
so,
great.
so your question, that I completely
No, you're
sidestepped.
good. You're good.
You
What
want to know which business book I discovered the industry cycles that is applicable to every industry?
I do want to know that, because that was the second part of the question: is where are we supposed to learn this stuff? So your book is going to answer that. Where is it?
Yeah, it was a kid's John Deere tractor book that I was reading to like my 6 year old 3, 4 years ago, where it talked about how like in the 1930s there was a whole bunch of people across the United States that would build tractors, and then John Deere came and bought all of them, and then this happened, and then it went through and described the macro cycle. I was like, oh, let me Google and be like, the auto industry started that way, and then they're like, oh, but they didn't really break up, right? So the auto industry is an outlier to this, aside until Elon Musk came, and now then and then when you start to look at every other industry, though, it goes through this exact ebb and flow. So unless
Interesting.
a couple of people stay dominant, so an example of like why didn't it happen to the auto industry? Well, Ford has an electric Lightning and an electric Mustang, and Ford sells to the government, and Ford, like they kept innovating. And the difference between that industry where big players stayed in power and control and other industries is that players got too big to think that they could fail. and actually stifled innovation. They did what's called killer acquisitions, where you buy innovative companies to shut them down. And insurance companies do this, and we need a wrench thrown into that machine to see if we could disrupt that cycle in healthcare.
Yeah, well, you're doing it now. You've mentioned technology probably more times in this conversation than any other word. So tell me about what technology musts that you see that a private practice owner should be leveraging.
I'm going to start so simple, because the reality is that if private practice owners listening to this, if I go too big, they go, "That's a great idea. I'm going to do that," and then they
In
put
20
some
years.
time in the future that never comes. So there's spectrums here. There are a wild amount of clinics that don't even use the home exercise program app. Like, that's okay. If that's you, start with a home exercise program app.
Mhm.
If you use a home exercise program app and you're using one that is really basic, I'm not going to show any specific software, but you know what I'm talking about, where it's like that, the patients aren't going to use it. You can't actually program variables. There's no actual ability to periodize. It's just like you pick the same 10 exercises and then it gets assigned to them. Like, great, I'm glad you started using that. Upgrade your home exercise program app. If you're using a more dynamic app, what features are you not fully using yet? Have you set up habits? Have you set up community, if that's something that your people care about? And use the feature set to the fullest extent. Now, if you're doing that, how could you interplay hardware with software? What can you use for testing inside your clinic that gives you data that you can then track inside your apps in a way that keeps the people really engaged and creates meaningful reasons for them to come back, and uh, non-duality, extend their lifetime value as a business, and keep them from entering the downward medicalization spiral that nearly everyone will land in if they don't exercise, eat healthy, and take care of their brains.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. First of all, great answer, because I think that is simple and actionable. So I appreciate that. It leads me to my next question, which is, you've said musculoskeletal injuries are the gateway drug to chronic disease. Now I know this is near and dear to your heart. So just help me understand what you meant by this.
Yeah. My dad died in front of me at age 64, and it nearly ruined my life. I did not have the coping skills. 26, 27 years old, and the next 3 years of my life were incredibly dark. Almost didn't come back from it. And that was the spark that created this version of me. So when I eventually woke up and I was 30 years old, and I decided I need to do something with my life. Like, what is my greater calling? It was to make a greater dent in healthcare. That's when I started my clinics. Right? That was the action step that I decided at that point in time. But I couldn't heal until I fully understood how he passed away. I mean, I couldn't make sense of it. He had a stent several months prior. It shouldn't have happened. So I line by line wrote out, investigated what, like, looked at exactly. He went to urgent care a few days prior. Was prescribed a medication that no one with heart disease should have been prescribed. I was like, "Oh, okay, I think that's it. That's it. Okay." Like, I went in there and I told them off. Like, that made me feel good for 5 minutes. Then I felt worse. But then I traced it back. I was like, no, like, that was the death blow. That's not the actual origin. A couple months prior, he had a stent put in, and this was his second time having that happen. And I remember the cardiologist not prescribing cardiac rehab. And I'm like, "Dad, what? Like, how is that possible? You had a quintuple bypass heart surgery a decade ago." And I beat myself up so much for not fighting for him to go get the rehab that he should have gotten. I was like, "That's it." I was like, "No, it was actually probably the quintuple bypass heart surgery, because even back then, that meant the rehab was joke." Then it hit me that in his mid 30s, he had suffered a knee injury, and up until then, he was relatively in shape. He was up and down. He was not some sort of stallion of health. I'm not going to misrepresent, but he was okay. And he had a knee injury. He ballooned up. Shortly after that, this is all from my mom, when it was like, tell me more about what dad was like, and this, and he ballooned up. And then shortly after that, he got diagnosed with heart disease, and shortly after that was diabetes, and then he was given a pill and a pamphlet, and that was his treatment for decades until he died. And when I started researching, okay, how often is this happening? There is a stat that you could find. It's not my stat, and it is years of healthy life lost annually. So my dad, who died at 64 and should have lived to, let's say, 78, that was 14 years of healthy life lost when he passed away. Depending on which diagnosis you consider as preventable, the number ranges somewhere between 10 and 20 million years of healthy life lost annually from fully preventable diseases that the CDC says lifestyle changes and public health initiatives could nearly fully eradicate. Who owns that? Where do you go for lifestyle changes and public health initiatives? Who's best positioned in the world to actually own that? That's us. That's the movement professionals. And man, I don't even know. I just woke up in the middle of that. I have no idea what question I'm asking. When I get all heated like that,
I mean,
reground me. Reground me. Where do we go from here?
But that's why I ask it, because, you know, I've heard you talk about it on other pods, and I think a lot of times that is lost. And you know what? It almost speaks to what we were talking about earlier on, which is we get so lost in how many sessions, how many evals, how many hamstrings, how many ACLs have I done this way? We just get on this rat wheel, and we forget about what are we doing? Like, what are we doing here? And we all went to school to try to make an impact, and it's totally lost on us because of the systems that have been in place. I really fault the insurance model and the insurance companies for doing this to us, because at the end of the day, me, Frank Benedetto, whoever is just trying to provide for our own family, we forget about why did we go to school? We went to school to help guys like your dad. And if we're not following intelligent business practices, we're not helping Frank's dad. We're not doing what we went to school for. We're not making the change that, what the hell else are we doing here? That's why we went to school. That's why we were born. To make the world better and to make the person in front of you better. And we forget, because that person becomes a number. And so that's what happened with your dad. That's me pulling you back in, because that is what fired you up so much, because you know that our profession was designed to help that knee injury, and no one got in front of your dad to say it properly. And your dad couldn't hear it. We didn't know how to say it. You know, I point fingers to the way we're educated also. And by the way, even the way we market, like, we should have been in front of your dad to say that knee injury matters, because now you're not exercising. Now you're going to balloon. Now it's good. You know, there's this crazy cascade that's about to transpire, and your numbers call that out. So that I think that's a great answer as to kind of what spurred this and why it matters, why our profession matters, why true sports matters, why Honey Badger matters, not just to provide for our families, and to help the guy in front of you. Because whoever's in front of you, that's Frank's dad. Whoever's in front of you, that's your dad, my dad. Those are the people we should be helping. And if this profession got their act together, which you're helping doing with Honey Badger, we'd be helping a whole lot more people. And when we talk about like this giant epidemic, this giant healthcare mess that is America, there is no reason that our lifespan, our health span shouldn't be increasing if we were doing our job better. And I think that should be everyone's mission. So if you're listening at home, you're like, Jesus Christ, I got another 15 patients today. Every single one of those goddamn patients is Frank's dad, is your dad. And that's what we're here to help. And by the way, doing smart business is only allowing us to fulfill that mission. And I think that's what we got wrong. That's what the grad schools got wrong. We were taught, we were educated, money is evil, running a good, successful, lean business, that's not why we're here. We're here to help. Well, guess what? If you're not doing the former, you'll never do the latter.
Mic drop moment. Thank you for finishing that off for me.
Yeah. Okay, Frank, how do we find you? Because I love what you're up to. Give me the easiest way to find you, easiest way to get involved with Honey Badger.
Yeah, Frank_Benedetto. Follow along. We have tons of free trainings. If there's a topic you want to dig into, if you want to see the flagship training that just gives a deeper look into this practice model, send me a message and we'll have a conversation.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for your time. I knew you would educate all of us. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you so much for listening. Let us know what you loved. Let us know what you hated so we can continue to iterate just like Honey Badger. Find this True Sports PT on Instagram. Bye-bye.